Polaris is one of the biggest names in an industry that basically makes toys for grown-ups. It makes things like snowmobiles, off-roaders, road-going motorcycles, and boats. And in 2021, it is enjoying some of its best times ever. Some wonder how long the good times can last. Polaris is taking steps to prepare itself for an uncertain future. When it comes to electrification, cars tend to steal the spotlight. But Polaris is working on electric versions of its motorcycles, off-roaders, and other products. It is a move at least some analysts say could dramatically widen Polaris's customer base, boost margins, and bring in new investors. But there is still a great deal of uncertainty around how much electric vehicles will appeal to customers or suit their needs. Polaris also faces competition, the threat of a contracting economy, pandemic-related disruptions, and perhaps a fear that the recent boom in powersports will wane. Polaris traces its history back to 1945, when Edgar and Alan Hettine and friend David Johnson started Hettine Hoist and Derrick in Roseau, Minnesota. Polaris came out with its first product, a snowmobile, in 1955. Edgar and three friends towed 900 pounds of gear on a 21-day, 1,200-mile journey across the frozen Alaskan wilderness. The trip sparked interest in their snowmobile, and sales took off from there. The company hit $1 billion in sales in 1995 and debuted the now-defunct Victory Motorcycles brand in 1997. Scott Wine was appointed chairman and CEO in 2008. Under Wine's stewardship, Polaris achieved new heights in sales, exceeding $5 billion in 2017. It opened 3 new factories and made several acquisitions, including Transamerican Auto Parts, which sells aftermarket parts and accessories for Jeeps and other off-road vehicles, Boat Holdings, a privately held boat manufacturer, Timber Sled, Taylor Dunn, Gem, Goupil, and Bramo. It also acquired the legendary Indian Motorcycles brand. By 2018, Polaris had more than 30 brands in its stable, and that year it was 496 on the Fortune 500 list.
I would describe it as a Fortune 500 company that feels like a small company. And I think it really goes back to the roots. We started in 1954 in, northern Minnesota, and, the 3 guys, the Hettine brothers and David Johnson, it was really about using innovation to solve a problem, which led to the innovation of a snowmobile. And, that kind of just launched what Polaris ultimately became.
As of 2020, Polaris sold its products through about 2,300 independent dealers in North America, approximately 1,400 independent international dealers through over 30 subsidiaries, and another 90 independent distributors in over 120 countries outside of North America. Most Polaris dealers sell a variety of products from the company alongside its rivals, and it spent about $300 million on research and development in 2020, trying to keep its product line fresh.
If you look at the products, the sales that we had this past year, 90% came from products we innovated just in the last 3 years.
Though it started as a snowmobile maker, that segment is a relatively small part of its business. Polaris estimated that the entire industry sold about 125,000 snowmobiles in the winter season that ended March 31st, 2020. That year, Polaris said it held the number 2 spot in snowmobile market share in North America. Off-road vehicles are Polaris's biggest revenue generator, making up 50 to 60% of its top line. Polaris has about a 40% market share in the off-road segment. The company debuted its first ATV in 1984, introduced the Ranger in 1997, and the Razor in 2007. Polaris sold about 1.2 million off-road vehicles around the world in 2020, the vast majority of them in North America. It also sells motorcycles, primarily larger cruiser and touring bikes under the Indian Motorcycles brand. Polaris also makes a 3-wheeler called the Slingshot, which is technically classified as a motorcycle. Total motorcycle sales around the world were about 330,000 units in 2020. And there are boats, mostly pontoon boats and deck boats under the Bennington, Godfrey, and Hurricane brands. Finally, Polaris sells a range of other types of vehicles for a range of other purposes, defense, commercial work, and so on. Thus, the business covers a lot of the bases in the outdoor recreation market, and indeed, Polaris's slogan, "Think Outside," shows it. It turns out that the coronavirus pandemic has left a great many more customers wanting to do exactly that. Polaris sales actually jumped in 2020. North American sales were up 25% throughout the year and 4% globally. The company added about 700,000 new riders to its base of about 6.5 million on the continent.
Last year was an incredibly strong year for the industry, but also for Polaris in particular. Obviously, North America retail sales were off the charts. Everyone was sheltering in place, looking for safe, socially distanced, family-oriented activities, and off-road vehicles, obviously, is one of those activities.
Expanding ridership is key to Polaris's growth strategy. In 2017, the company launched a rental business called Polaris Adventures.
Traditionally, the way you get consumers involved in your category is you sell them a unit, which, these are big ticket consumer discretionary items, $10, $20, $30,000. So it's tough to access unless you want to totally commit. But with Polaris Adventures, they've really lowered the bar to what it takes to enjoy this lifestyle.
The brand also has partners who use its vehicles and participate in events. Brantley Gilbert is a country music star and a brand partner for Polaris. He found out about the company when he was approached at a show by Lee and Tiffany Lakowski, who have a hunting show called Crush on the Outdoor Channel.
I was building my farm in Alabama. I had ridden on a Polaris with Lee and was just really impressed with the machine.
He favors the off-road vehicles, but has tried the company's snowmobiles as well.
We went up to Minnesota and they took us out with Rangers, racers, and snowmobiles. And this was the second time I've ever been on a snowmobile in my life, and got it up to over 100 miles an hour before one of the Polaris people caught up to me and was like, hey, don't do that.
Gilbert promotes the brand and does events with the company, often for charity. In 2020, Polaris signed a 10-year partnership with Zero Motorcycles, an all-electric motorcycle brand. The partnership will allow Polaris to apply Zero's electric technology to its off-road vehicles and snowmobiles.
This is not their first foray into EVs. They do have some smaller businesses, mostly on the commercial side, in campus environments, things like that. They tried motorcycles a few years ago. That didn't work all that well. And so it allows them to sort of share the costs and the R&D with another company, which makes the cost aspect of these vehicles a lot more palatable, I guess, going forward. And it also allows them, I think, to really leverage their manufacturing scale. They could take those powertrains and incorporate them into their existing manufacturing base.
Polaris has plans to offer an electric version of every one of its vehicles by 2025, and the first of several new EVs will roll out by the end of 2021.
We're starting from a very strong position because they already have spent, well over 10 years innovating and building up a capability. And now we're marrying the two together. And for us, it's about, we're focusing on what we do best, which is innovating the Ranger, the chassis, the look and feel, the ride, the handling. And then we're working with them and leveraging their expertise around developing that electrified powertrain. And so, I think there's a huge opportunity there. We're going to end up coming out of this with, I think, a very good lineup of electrified vehicles over the next 3 to 5 years.
Polaris already offers an electric version of its Ranger off-road side-by-side and a lot of other vehicles in other lines, primarily through its acquired companies. But electrification poses challenges. The technology isn't quite capable of delivering the same performance, range, and durability as internal combustion counterparts.
I think one of the struggles is, we can't overnight say, hey, look, everything's going to go electric, because I don't have any visibility that that's actually the case. But what we do know is that people have a demand for that vehicle. I mean, we actually do produce a lithium-ion Ranger today. It's not very good, quite frankly, and yet we still sell a decent number of them.
Morgan Stanley said in a January 2021 note that Polaris is already undervalued, and the company's electrification efforts could considerably widen their total addressable market and catch the attention of customers who are especially excited about electric vehicle technology. The note also said the company is on the verge of a transformative shift. One of Harley-Davidson's problems, say followers of the company, is that its core audience is older and aging. Polaris, on the other hand, enjoys strong demand among younger customers, especially millennials. It has a wider array of products, including dirt bikes and off-roaders, that appeal to younger buyers. Polaris has the goal of growing its customer base 40% in the next 10 years. About 25% of its sales went to buyers between the ages of 24 and 39 in 2019. Sales to this demographic were up 45% in the third quarter of 2020, according to Morgan Stanley. The younger buyer base may bode well for Polaris's electric offerings, the firm said. Over the last 10 years, EVs have made up about 2% of Polaris's total sales. but Morgan Stanley estimates could be as much as 10% of sales by 2030. As with cars, powersports sales are vulnerable to the ups and downs of the economy. Drops in credit lending can hurt customers. A few tough winters can keep buyers away from dealerships, and weather has a pretty big impact on the choice to buy an ATV or snowmobile in the first place. The company also suffered a few setbacks from the coronavirus pandemic. Like some automakers, Polaris initiated an online sales program called Click, Deliver, Ride to reach customers either locked down or skittish about heading to stores. It turns out that the pandemic did not seem to keep customers away, but did create another problem: supply constraints. While North American sales jumped 28% in the fourth quarter of 2020, dealer inventory fell 58%. This was largely because the pandemic spurred plant shutdowns lasting weeks, as well as disruptions to the supply chain.
Logistics are a challenge for us. The ports are jammed up. Trucking is in short supply and high demand. And just getting our components in from our suppliers is a challenge because they've had to ramp up, 2x what their normal production level would be to support it.
The company is taking steps to address these challenges and expects to fix shortages in 2021. But skeptics wonder whether the coronavirus demand boom will last as the world hopefully emerges from the pandemic and consumers have more spending options.
I think we'd be foolish to say we would expect it to continue at the levels it is now, because I don't think that's the case. The reality is our business has grown for decades on new customers coming in. Typically our new customer growth is somewhere in the 60% of our customer growth range. So it has been higher, and I think there is a level of the pandemic that has caused that. But, one of the things that we know about our business is it can become contagious. You go out and buy a vehicle, you start taking your family, your friends out. Next thing you know, they're like, hey, I would really love to get one of these things because I want to go riding with you.
Analysts who follow the company also say they have seen some pressure on Polaris's margins.
I think overall we've seen, as Polaris has entered some of these new categories, the margin profile isn't the same, and we've seen some margin erosion. Some of that is, extra spending to get around or to improve the vehicle safety. Some of it is tariff pressure. Polaris has the most sophisticated supply chain in the world, I think, in this category, and it does source some product from China. So tariffs have been an issue and a significant cost.
Risks to Polaris's electric strategy are numerous, and many of them are similar to those found in the debates over electric cars. Consumers need to be convinced that electric snowmobiles and off-roaders will perform as well as gas-powered ones. There are the familiar questions around range anxiety and charging infrastructure, especially when these vehicles are being used in remote areas or on long trips. Additionally, there are questions about whether making investments in electric motorcycles and off-roaders will even pay off in the long run. Much of the urgency around electrification centers on cars and large commercial vehicles, which pump out the vast majority of the world's vehicle emissions. An electric ATV might be nice, but it might not be enough of a priority for regulators or buyers to justify the investments made. Finally, there is competition, which could be pretty fierce. In snowmobiles and off-roaders, Polaris competes with Yamaha, Honda, BRP, Kawasaki, and Polaris's former owner, Textron.
We've got great competitors, and quite frankly, that's a good thing because competition keeps everybody on their game and forces cycles of innovation. It's better for the consumer overall because they're going to end up getting the best of the best. One of the benefits we have is we are the largest player, and in many markets by 2 or 3-fold relative to our competitors. And the reason that's important is we have an incredible base that we can leverage and a significant customer loyalty. And so that gives us the opportunity to have that repeat buyer coming back.
Despite the weight of the coronavirus pandemic, the last year has been somewhat positive for Polaris, allowing it to attract a whole new crop of customers to the lifestyles its products may enable. Its electric strategy could resonate with an even greater array of buyers and investors, whatever risks it brings with it.